Chapter 82, Love and Hate. This is your semester break, right? You can hang out with Percival, Joy said with a warm smile. Both boys looked at each other, tilting their heads slightly. Meanwhile, Valentina had a bright smile. Godfrey doesn't have a close friend, but I'm sure he'll be close with Percy. Do you remember when Percy saw Godfrey, the 1-year-old and 1-day-old duo? Godfrey raised an eyebrow, not just by what his mother said, but he was genuinely amazed to see her sparkle like this, with so much happiness. Both women eventually left. Godfrey saw Percival open the door to his apartment, and his eyes locked on the young blue-haired woman in the dining room. His pupils narrowed. Wasn't that one of the faces he'd seen on the Pagoda Guild's billboard, one of the rising stars in the entertainment department of the guild? Of course, she looked incredibly good. People like this had summons that enhanced their looks, or at least paid for sessions with people that did. Someone like Snow could simply sit behind a table and rake in millions because of his summon's unique ability. The young woman looked back at the last minute before the door shut. Strangely, their mum is the only one that looks ordinary, Godfrey thought as he walked up to his own apartment. Upon stepping into the spacious living room, which led to the dining room, all brightly lit up, Victoria stood at the dining table, an apron worn over her usual executive outfit. "I've prepared your meal," she said without even looking at him as she arranged the dishes on the table. Meanwhile, at Percival's house, his eldest sister averted her eyes from her tablet when he showed up in the sitting room in a casual dress. "Who was that?" Priscilla asked. "Who?" Percival lifted an eyebrow. "There was a boy behind you. He wore Manhattan High's jacket." "Oh, he's Godfrey, the one Mum talks about. The one whose father fought an army of orcs." Priscilla's eyes widened with shock. Some minutes later, the doorbell at Godfrey's apartment rang, and Victoria opened the door. Percival's eyes slowly narrowed as he stared at the tall, fit woman looking at them with a raised eyebrow. His sister, Priscilla, lifted the small cake in her hands. "Hi, we live over there and—" "Come in." Victoria opened the door. She was well aware of who they were after the several conversations her boss, Valentina, had with their mother, both in this house and their own. It was quite a common thing, only the boys were clueless about it. "Hi Godfrey, I'm Priscilla, your neighbor." Priscilla introduced herself to Godfrey, who was on the couch. "I just couldn't hold myself when I found out you're our neighbor. You're Roland's son." She covered her mouth to stifle her voice while sitting. Percival, who wore a black nose mask hiding his burn mark, sat nonchalantly, looking elsewhere like none of this concerned him. He was actually bearing a grudge against his sister for not changing his appearance. On the other hand, Godfrey was stunned, as this was the first time someone genuinely made him feel that his father wasn't just dead and forgotten. "My mom, I and brother were all at Amazon General Hospital when it happened. We came to visit her workplace, then we lived in Amazon City. Not just us, there were hundreds of people in that hospital. See, can I speak about this?" Priscilla paused, concerned it might strike a wrong chord. "I want to hear it," Godfrey replied. "Apparently a red gate opened up right before your mum rushed in, but your father couldn't go. And it was nowhere close to the hospital but midway. My mum said right when your head was out, another gate opened up, a red gate, and it was an instant dungeon break." Priscilla pursed her lips. It was red for a second and suddenly became black. "I have never felt fear as much as that day in my entire life, the same for hope. Hundreds of people prayed as your father fought outside. The explosions shook the hospital and other buildings around. I could remember thinking, was he dead? Please don't die, several times." Priscilla's expression became bittersweet. "Had your father not killed and closed the portal, we wouldn't have been alive. Hundreds of families would have been lost, and seeing you, it's just. Godfrey was speechless, maybe even beyond that. His mind was strangely peaceful, not one thought. Nobody had ever spoken to him about his father like this. He just realized there was a stark difference between those who experienced it, who watched his father defend not just his unborn child and wife but them all, and those who sat in the comfort of their homes listening to it. Some appreciated his efforts, but those who were good weren't as loud as the negative ones who expected him to fill his father's shoes. Was that why Percival had always helped him? Even if he was too young to comprehend what happened back then, he still showed gratitude. Seeing Priscilla's worried expression at Godfrey's reaction, Victoria smiled. "He's dumbfounded since nobody has spoken to him about his father. He'll process it," she said. Priscilla replied with a smile of her own before turning to Percival. "Has my brother been hard on you in school?" At that moment, Godfrey knew it. One word and he'd destroy Percival's life, and it made him chuckle softly. The cool third-year student was already glaring at him to speak the truth. He wasn't. For the first time, Victoria saw Godfrey flash a pleasant smile at someone who wasn't his mother or her. At a different place in Manhattan, Cecil sat in her father's office, facing the man whose expression was as hard as stone. "I asked your teacher some questions before calling you. Do you know what he told me?" Cecil tilted her head. "What?" "That a certain brat surnamed Daniels beat you in combat skills." Cecil's father erupted, causing her to flinch. "You let the son of that bastard, who did nothing but selfishly protect his family while everything around him was crushed, beat you in what you're best at." Her father glared hard at her. "Haven't I told you repeatedly of your uncle's death? His workplace was close to that hospital, but that man, whose job was to protect the people, allowed it to be ravaged. Tell me, what did you do to him? You must have been exhausted after dealing with the others. Did you teach him a lesson afterwards?" "He apologized," Cecil stuttered. Her father rose to his feet. "He beat you up and apologized, and you come here to say that to me?" Cecil scampered out of the office under her father's suffocating glare. "Hero's son," her father muttered. "If a man is hailed as a hero for simply protecting his family, I should be a savior for paying people's salary at Godfrey's house." An hour after Percival and his sister left, he switched on the TV, feeling refreshed and light. They had actually connected him to a platform where he saw people counting their days of grace after they'd been saved, and what they did with it. Lives changed from his father's deeds. It wasn't one, but over 100 who were sincerely and proactively grateful. They were just a small group in this large world where people had long moved on from the 16-year-old incident. As the TV came to life, it was the news channel. Dungeon appearances have spiked in Manhattan and haven't stopped increasing. Hearing the news anchor say that, Godfrey squinted. Wasn't the same thing happening in Amazon City? He saw a similar news report 4 months ago in Amazon City, and now the same thing was happening in Manhattan. The public at large are frightened with thoughts that this could be the second Great Despair in its infancy. Many are resorting to self-preservation, and rumors of an apocalypse are spreading. The authorities have given their word that both they and the leaders of guilds will ensure safety. Godfrey sat up, all traces of relaxation gone. Speculations of Kane's rebirth are at large, but this is simply the job of a minority spreading false news and causing fear. That aside, the anchor cleared his throat. Humanity has enlarged its frontiers into space, as the Lord Tier Blue Gate dungeon on the moon has been cleared, and a settlement has been built. Manhattan has spearheaded the project along with the elites of Manhattan Summoners High. Hearing about the Manhattan elites made Godfrey frown. He couldn't predict what the seniors would think once they returned, and discovered there was another king. They weren't used to such, and might naturally not be on his side. If he didn't want to be on the losing side, it was best he used this month to train. So far, Godfrey had learnt a few summoner abilities: Echo, Exchange, and Majorly Symbiosis, which was passive. There were more, way more, that made a summoner and his summon stronger and more versatile. He walked into his room, got into position, and began to meditate. In the evening, Valentina opened her son's door, her lips curling up as she saw him doing pull-ups while sweating profusely. It reminded her of Roland. "That's enough, Godfrey. Go take a bath. We're having dinner at Percy's place," she said and shut the door. Godfrey left the pole, landing with a shocked face. She already gave him a nickname. At Percival's apartment, Godfrey marveled as Priscilla arranged the dishes, but her hair was pink and really attractive. Even his mother was stunned when she came out the second time with purple hair, each time changing her looks slightly as her skin also shifted tone. Not too much, but the subtle changes enhanced the hair color. When she finally sat down, it became brown. It was a spectacular sight, especially since his mother was very reactive. This was the reason Priscilla was known as Rainbow. The dinner was nothing remarkable or more extravagant than what he was already used to, but he had never seen his mother so happy. 2 days later, Godfrey emerged from their apartment in a sweatshirt, pants, a pair of black sneakers, and a face cap. Both hands were in his pockets as he strolled down to the elevator. After meditating for 2 days straight, only taking breaks to eat, sleep, and do some little stuff, he needed some fresh air. With a familiar chime, the elevator opened, and as Godfrey walked in, he spotted Percival, the pale-skinned, blue-haired teen who must have turned quite a lot of heads even with his nose mask, nodded at him, and was about to leave when an alarm rang through all the speakers throughout the complex. We have noticed a sudden spike in mana fluctuations at the underground parking lot. We advise everyone to stay indoors and away from the parking lot until we handle the situation. Percival made a swift turn, slamming the button for the ground floor so hard that Godfrey raised an eyebrow. He noticed Percival's bloodshot eyes and throbbing veins, prompting him to squint. There was only one thing that came to Godfrey's mind that could make Percival act like this. His family. The moment they reached the ground floor, Percival burst out, breezing past several people in the lobby, most of them security men, who, before they could turn, realized Percival was gone. Godfrey was hot on his heels. It couldn't be that the one woman who had brought genuine happiness to his mother and taught her kids to be so different was going to be a victim of this dungeon spike. That thought went to the back of his head the moment they entered the underground parking lot, and the first thing he saw was a minotaur choking Percival's mother with just one hand. It lifted her off the ground, a bit amused at her futile struggle. The minotaur was at least 2 feet taller than her. There were other minotaurs slamming cars aside to attack 6 other people. Their screams filled the parking lot, but it just wasn't as loud as the silent yet struggling woman whose throat was being slowly crushed by a cruel beast. Percival's eyes went red with rage. Water manifested from nowhere, wrapping itself around the minotaur's thick neck. Its eyes went wide as it let go of Percival's mother, struggling to remove the water leash. But 2 chains made of water attached it to the earth and wrapped around the minotaur's large wrists, pulling it down to its knees. The beast roared, veins throbbing, but it couldn't do a thing as Percival raised his hand and the thick water leash became a blob. Bubbles rose as the minotaur choked. Seeing this, the other 4 turned. Godfrey stretched his hand. A golden diagram shimmered into existence before Percival's mother. The knight captain blocked a minotaur's charge, wrapped his gauntleted hand around its horn, and slammed it against a car, crushing the car completely. With a grunt, Mountain tossed its broken horn at the other 3 minotaurs. They growled, eyes flashing maliciously after glancing at their fallen kin. These dungeon beasts showed signs of intelligence for their brute size, which easily matched Mountain's, whose robustness was because of the bulk of his armor. Suddenly, as they were about to make a move, their heads were covered in a blob of water. No matter how much they clawed, the water blob refused to burst. With a furious glare, the minotaurs charged at Mountain, but water chains manifested from thin air, attaching themselves to a water anchor fastened to the ground and binding the limbs of the minotaurs. Godfrey shot Percival, who went to aid his mother, a cautious glance. The fact that he wanted the minotaurs to experience helplessness as their life slowly left them was a testament to the rage within him. Loud thuds echoed as the minotaurs dropped to the ground, all dead. Godfrey looked around. Earlier he was a bit confused since they walked into the same underground parking lot, just with some beasts, but now that he examined the place more consciously, he discovered these cars looked like they'd been abandoned for over a decade. They remained intact but layered in dust, with moss creeping along the walls. Plants had grown in between most cars, and even the concrete floor had cracks. During his examination, the other people gathered, 2 men, 3 women, and a 15-year-old girl with chestnut hair. The man and the woman before her seemed to be her parents. All of them had frightened faces, a sign that they were part of the summoner community that estranged themselves from dungeons. Naturally, some people wanted to live in the illusion that they were in a peaceful world. A sign of how far these people had fallen was that they didn't even allow their summons to defend them. Godfrey tilted his head toward Mrs. Joy, the same thing for her. "I can't see any other beast, and there's no path leading to the boss," Godfrey said. Gwen, the 15-year-old girl, stretched her hand, pointing to a spot behind him. When Godfrey turned, he saw the exit. The radiance of the sun shone through, as if inviting them back to the normal world. "Can we leave now?" Gwen said, shivering as she took another look at the underground parking lot. Percival looked at Godfrey. It didn't make any sense. "We'll be back," Percival said to his mother, who watched with concern as he and Godfrey made their way to the exit and vanished into the golden radiance. While they waited with great expectations, Godfrey and Percival were stunned at what they saw. They found themselves in a deserted city. There were no skyscrapers, with the highest building being around 10 stories tall, mostly made of blocks. The asphalt roads were filled with cracks. Cars were abandoned on the road. Most of them had already lost their color, looking rusted from age. "This is basically a city," Godfrey frowned. How are we going to find the boss? He was used to green gate dungeons that were quite small, mostly in an ancient castle, but this time around, he didn't even know where to start. It was like a blue gate dungeon, but hidden from plain sight. The death rate of such a dungeon would be terrifying. We have a bigger problem. A green gate dungeon this big is usually a joint dungeon. Percival turned to Godfrey. What I mean is there will be others from different places around the world, wherever the other hidden portals are. Hard lines appeared on Godfrey's forehead. We might face a peak-level high-tier or a lord-tier boss, Percival stated grimly. It's quiet, Godfrey said, listening to the wind. All of a sudden his blue eyes gleamed. Something's coming. It's close, Percival said as both of them glared in the same direction. A few seconds later, a mighty horse, almost 8 feet tall with a robust physique, galloped into the street. Its eyes were like hot coals. It blazed like a furnace from its wide nostrils. Strange words were branded into both sides of its thick neck, and those words glowed like blazing coal in the depths of a fire. The hooves of this horse blazed with yellow flames, while cracks ran up as if its legs were the walls of a volcano. Thick chains attached this horse to a chariot where a broad-chested man with grey hair stood. Upon seeing them, he waved. Hey boys, looks like you just arrived. Are you alone or with more people? The man alighted from the chariot with a friendly smile and patted the huge horse as if it wasn't as hot as the deepest part of a volcano. I'm Charles, a hunter from Gate Defenders Guild. We already have more than 30 people who are safe under our protection. That horse is his summon. The mana fluctuations from it are at the level of a high tier, and its flames are far more dangerous than the Igni Raptors, Godfrey said internally. How long have you been here? Percival asked with a placid look. 3 days. Hearing that, both boys looked at each other with alarm. Look, you can't survive alone against the army of Khan. That thing has hordes of violent beasts that know how to taunt you before ending your life, Charles said, but was inwardly amazed that neither Godfrey nor Percival budged. Charles sighed, we're not here alone. There are other groups such as Kane's fanatics, and an even more dangerous man you can't survive against, even if you're both Lord Tier. One man, Godfrey raised an eyebrow. He's a vagabond, Charles stated solemnly. Both Godfrey and Percival looked at each other. They already understood the danger when they heard about Kane's fanatics, but a vagabond. Who was that? What's that? Godfrey asked. Charles was surprised, but before he could respond, Joy and the others came out. They were all concerned that the boys had not returned. Percy, Godfrey, Joy muttered, relief flooding her heart when she saw both teens, but the strange man and his mount made her raise her guard. The others already felt despair when they came out, and it wasn't Skyline 88 but a deserted street that came into view. Where's your place? Percival asked. Godfrey walked into a building, his eyes narrowing as he examined the place. It had a staircase at the right and left ends of the hall, which led to a mezzanine with green metal doors along the walls. On the corridors of the mezzanine, several people were in groups, some chatting, some leaning against the metal railing, but everything they were doing ceased when Charles walked in with 8 new faces. The one who had the greatest reaction was the man on the ground floor, whose legs were on top of a metal table as he leaned against his chair. A claw scar marred his face, and his falcon eyes locked on them with distaste. A girl with pink hair, sleeveless top and pants leaned against the other end of the hall, just behind the falcon-eyed man. A rifle was slung across her back, the same as with other individuals. Godfrey guessed the ones with guns were either part of Charles' guild or from another guild. I knew from the moment you left alone that you would not return with good news, Falco, the man with the scar, said coldly. Charles frowned. He was much bigger in size than Falco. Are you saying that I should leave women and children out there alone? We already have enough. We can't protect or feed more, Falco replied. He had more control over his emotions than Charles, who was already furious. You have no need to worry. I'll protect those I came with, Percival intervened. The men and women around Falco, either sitting on tires or boxes, or leaning on the wall like the pink-haired girl, chuckled mockingly. Percival didn't have the buff build they had, and he looked more like an entertainer than a combatant. What tier are you? Falco asked. Lord Tier. The moment Percival said that, everyone stopped their hyena-like chuckles. Falco merely smiled. And you? He faced Godfrey. High tier, Godfrey shrugged. The others with them were at most mid-level elite tier, but when it came to Percival's mother, her response shocked everyone. I have no tear. What that meant was she wasn't a summoner. Everyone glanced at Mrs. Joy. Seeing their piercing glances, Godfrey drew near to her while Percival took a step forward. She's my mother. Falco's eyes brightened. I see you birthed well, he smiled. Charles, already fed up, pointed at the pink-haired girl. Lotus, please take them to their rooms. Lotus nodded. Follow me, she said as they ascended the staircase to the second mezzanine floor. The tension on people's faces made Godfrey imagine how bad it was when dungeons first came. The order of the authorities brought the peace and stability that they enjoyed, but was it truly that good? When Lotus opened the metal doors, they saw dusty rooms with bunker beds. They were small but could accommodate 4 people each. As Lotus turned to leave, Godfrey spoke. Wait. She paused, turning towards him. Is there any plan on how we're going to leave here? What do you mean? How are we going to kill the boss? Isn't it the one called Khan? Godfrey asked. Lotus scoffed. You should be more worried about getting a meal tonight. If we kill the boss, we don't have to stay until nightfall, Godfrey replied. A man sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall close to a metal door, snapped toward them. You talk too much, kid. Godfrey glanced at him with a raised eyebrow. Who are you looking at like that? The man, who looked to be in his mid-40s, picked up the metal bat resting on his thighs and rose to his feet. He was clearly a man who was fed up with his bad day and wanted someone to vent on. As the man was about to walk past Lotus, she placed her hand on his shoulder. Let him be, Lotus said before facing Godfrey. This place is as vast as a city, and there are hundreds of minotaurs waiting to tear us apart, and a group of fanatics trying to sniff us out. It's best you stay up and wait. She watched the man scowl and go back to his spot before walking away. Falco will call for you, Lotus said finally before descending. I heard the boy is a high tier, another man said to the one with the bat. The one with the bat, who had a slightly bald head, scowled. It won't change a thing when I put a bullet through his skull. A woman who had been watching the entire scene spat. You're right, he might be a high tier and the other a lord tier, but he's still young and arrogant. All that is none of my concern. I'm just pissed off they'll shorten our ration. Meanwhile, inside one of the rooms, Godfrey finally couldn't remain sitting, so he rose to his feet. I'll look around. Be careful, Joy said as Godfrey walked out. Percival chuckled. It's them who should be careful of him. With or without a summon, he's not weak. Everyone in the room glanced at Percival. They had seen how he effortlessly brought down the Minotaurs, which could shove cars aside, but for him to speak so highly of Godfrey, it seemed like Godfrey might be on par with him. Outside, Charles and Falco, with the rest of their party who were seated around the rectangular table, saw Godfrey head for the rooftop. Not a second after he shut the door, the man with the bat stood up. He, another man, and the woman all went to the same place, their intention obvious. Seeing this, Lotus rubbed her forehead. Hey, she snapped, glaring at the man and his cronies who had lost their sense of reason and wanted to gang up on a teenager. The man froze, but Falco shook his head and waved at him. Go along. The man grinned and left through the door. What are you doing? Charles almost lost it. He won't die, he's a high tier. I just want to know what his summon is. The next would be the blue-haired one. Charles rose to his feet and angrily ascended the mezzanine. When he got close to the door, something suddenly slammed it from the other side, and the metal door caved in. Alarmed, Charles pushed the door open and saw the man with the bat on the floor with a bloodied face, teeth lost, nose broken. He was the one who slammed the door. The other 2 sprawled on the ground with disfigured faces. Charles' eyes met Godfrey's. The teenager flexed his fist, eyeing him as if he was possibly the next target. Charles felt his spine grow cold. This teenager had taken out 3 people in such a short amount of time without his summon, and with 1 blow each. He's no ordinary kid, Charles concluded. They're all half dead, you didn't show mercy. Godfrey raised an eyebrow. That's a concept that only exists back on Earth. There I can only be reactive and within limits to avoid breaking the law. But here, in the lawless expanse of this dungeon, if I'm not ruthless enough, I'll be dead. Dungeon hunting isn't a new thing for you, I see. You're quite rational for a teenager, Charles said, walking past Godfrey to the edge of the roof before sighing. This should be the 27th in the outside world, right? No, it's the 24th. Godfrey's reply made Charles' eyes widen, but I came here on the 24th. Around 10 a.m. my group left the guild. I left my house around 1 p.m. It's just been 3 hours. Godfrey's reply made Charles gasp. An hour outside is a day here, so it's just been 3 hours outside and 3 days in here. Thank God. Charles burst into light-hearted laughter. I thought I'd been away from my little girl for 3 days. It's just been 3 hours, work time isn't even over. His voice was loud, and so was his laughter as it echoed through the empty streets. Suddenly, a roar came from afar. Charles immediately lost his light-hearted mood as he spotted a minotaur with an enormous butcher knife heading toward them. It wasn't alone. The street behind it was soon full of minotaurs, about 40 of them in total. Their black horns, curving upward, gleamed like black steel, and their eyes glowed with cruel intelligence. "Come inside, I and the rest of my party will handle this," Charles said as he was about to rush inside, but he found Godfrey still standing at the edge. "There's no need to trouble them." As Godfrey spoke, a diagram flared beside him. The moment Charles set his eyes on the knight, whose helmet had no eye hole, no visor, but just a blade-like crown at the top of the helmet and a bow bigger than him, his expression changed. Ballista suddenly became crimson, and 10 more portals of swirling gold appeared behind him. From them, 10 towering bow knights stepped out. The sight of them, regal golden knights with fluttering cloaks and giant bows, put Charles' mind in a state of shock. All of them knocked their massive bows, and with thunderous sounds of the bowstrings, large arrows were launched. None of the minotaurs expected it, and neither was their bulk of any use. It seemed like the creator of such a long-range company made them for the specific purpose of foes with great size. Each arrow struck with an unexpectedly powerful force, slamming minotaurs off their feet. Some arrows pierced through 3 at once, some lodged them to the wall. Ballista aimed at the one with the butcher knife. His first arrow spun, making a stunning curve right through the neck of a minotaur and striking the butcher minotaur. It staggered backward, a huge arrow protruding from its chest. In an instant, another pierced through, followed by another, sending the minotaur into the air. Mid-air, it saw another arrow which pierced through the center of its head, punching through the hard skull that had deflected bullets like it was foam. Charles could barely believe his eyes as he stared at the corpses of 40 minotaurs lying dead in their pool of blood, with tall arrows sticking out of their bodies. The bow knights looked around as if searching for more targets. They had barely warmed up. How was this different from practice? Charles knew those 40 minotaurs. Each had great strength. At least they were able to shove cars that weighed a ton aside, and to kill all 40 with such ease was impossible for him. Godfrey frowned when he heard the sound of a gun. With a slow turn, he saw one of Charles' guild members pointing his rifle at him, sweat beads dripping down from his head. He wore a horrified expression. "Have you gone through the readjustment class, or have you fed?" The man asked, his finger ready to hit the trigger at the slightest movement. "Put the gun down," Charles bellowed, alarmed, as Ballista and all 10 bow knights gathered before Godfrey and aimed at the man. "I said put it down," Charles yelled for the second time. "Readjustment class, fed, what's that?" Godfrey's question made the guild member lower his gun with a perplexed look. This kid had no idea about the 2 ends of a humanoid summoner. The people from the building gathered at the rooftop, whispering amongst themselves in shock as they watched the guild party move through the corpses. Lotus pulled out an arrow from 3 minotaurs and turned to the gold-haired teenager in a sweatshirt, standing beside Percival, both of whom were at the front of the crowd at the rooftop. "He did this," she gasped. "Can we go after the boss now?" Godfrey asked in a loud voice so they could hear him. "There's no need to. With the number of corpses here, Khan will come straight to us with his army. Even worse, Kane's fanatics will also come here, and they'll surely spare you since you're a humanoid summoner like a good number of them," Falco replied with clenched teeth. "He helped us and you speak to him in such a manner," Charles frowned. Falco glared at him. "This is all your fault. Our hideout has been exposed, and that too by a boy who hasn't gone through the readjustment program. He can go rogue," he hissed. "The minotaurs were close. They would have sniffed us out, and at such close range, forget the hideout, we would have lost lives," Lotus retorted calmly. "I have 100 more of these knights. Just point me in the right direction, and I'll go check out the boss." Falco's ears rang like a bomb had exploded within his vicinity. He couldn't even produce a word. Even Percival doubted his ears. 100 bow knights, and all of them were tier 5, almost high tiers. If this was true, Godfrey was a walking, breathing dungeon. Within the hall, Falco sat behind the table, propping his chin with both hands while others stood around the table. Charles sat at the opposite side of the table with Godfrey by his side. They were all gathered for a single reason, discussing how to get out of the dungeon, which would mean killing the boss. The boss is in the heart of the city, and with him is an army of 200 armored minotaurs, his main forces, Falco said, looking at the eyes of all of them, especially Godfrey's. He had to admit the kid flaunted a bit of his strength, and everyone had gathered to do what he said. Such strength at such an age was envious. What about the ones he killed? If you exclude them, doesn't that mean the Khan now has 160 minotaurs? Someone hanging at the mezzanine railing asked. Falco shot the man who spoke a side-eye. I said armored minotaurs. The ones we've faced so far, including those the kid killed, are all the Khan's marauders. There are over 200 of them, but we've killed quite a number, and if we include the number the kid just killed, the marauders should be less than 100. He continued after taking a breath. The problem is the two mini-bosses, captains of the Khan's army. The first is Demon Horn, who has an endless flock of crows that can devour their target, and the dead crows are also able to revive. Falco continued, the other is Ash Horn. Its ability is manifesting and controlling magma. Both these mini-bosses are tier 6.9 each but can effortlessly handle a summon above 7. Bullets also don't work on them. The main boss should be a Lord tier, but we don't know what it can do. Percival crossed his arms. I heard of a man who can kill 2 Lord tiers. Why hasn't he gone after this boss? Humanoid summoners are strange, Falco replied, glancing at Godfrey meaningfully. Seeing his glance, Charles frowned and decided to speak up. We have a speculation that the vagabond is after Kane's fanatics. This is a window for us to kill the boss and leave. With Godfrey's summon, we have no problem doing that. I can't believe we're depending on a humanoid summoner, a guild party member spat. Falco turned to Lotus. What do you think about this? Lotus glanced at Godfrey. A humanoid summon might have killed and eaten my brother's summon, but he feels different. He's not twisted like the rest of them, at least not yet. Well, if Lotus hasn't ripped your head off, then I guess we can. Falco couldn't complete the sentence as a loud voice came from above. It was from Mrs. Joy, Percival's mother. I can't sit and let you all talk like you know his fate. He's better than all of you gathered here. You talk like he can't kill all of you if he wanted to. Everyone's faces twisted, Falco glaring at Mrs. Joy. Mrs. Joy glared back. Godfrey wants to get us out of here. By all means, aid him and stop finding reasons to sit in this dump acting like a leader. Silence spread out. No one expected this meek-looking woman to suddenly transform into this fierce lioness. Charles suddenly burst into laughter. You're one tough woman. Is he your son? Mrs. Joy crossed her arms while standing close to the railing on the 3rd floor. He is. Godfrey blinked. A warm smile appeared on his face. Charles rose to his feet. You've heard the woman. It's time to get out of here. Falco scoffed. With the plan set, Godfrey and Lotus moved out with Charles to scout ahead. Standing in Charles' chariot, Godfrey squinted as the mighty horse galloped on the road, moving with great speed rivaling a vehicle. All of a sudden, the horse came to a stop, neighing loudly with both forelimbs off the ground. The 3 of them in the chariot were frozen at the site 300 meters away. A heap of corpses blocked the road, not the corpses of minotaurs, but of agents from the authorities, guild parties, and Kane's fanatics, numbering up to 50 summoners and 50 summons. This was different from the 40 minotaurs Godfrey killed. Against 60 summoners, it would not be that easy, especially when he would be dealing with well-trained, experienced adults. And Godfrey knew it was simply impossible for him to kill all of them. Summons had a diversity of skills. They didn't charge head-on like minotaurs. Yet seated on top of this heap was a single being, a humanoid but with blue skin, a well-built, lean physique. It had a head full of long grey hair that fell down to its waist, and its face was hidden behind a thick metal mask with a ferocious expression and 2 short horns. 2 braids fell on both sides of its shoulders, resting on its chest. It also wore a hakama which went around its waist and came down to its ankles. 2 weapons were at its waist, a katana and a wakizashi, both in their black sheaths with golden-plated ends and mouths. This summon was called an Oni Ronin. Its tier was unknown, but it was 9 feet tall and capable of slaying over 50 summoners from the authorities and the fanatics faction. It's the vagabond's summon, Lotus gasped. Godfrey, follow Lotus and run. When you do, don't look back. That thing's katana can cut through anything. We've lost 4 of our men, one who was as strong as me and Falco to it. The rest of us escaped because of Kane's fanatics. Godfrey's expression changed. Why would you fight someone that strong? We thought he was a fanatic, Charles whispered. Just then the Ronin leaped down. The instant its feet touched the ground, it held the wakizashi and suddenly teleported, appearing right before Charles' summon. Lotus' eyes widened. It can teleport. Both she and Godfrey leaped out of the chariot, and Charles's horse lifted its legs off the ground, evading the edge of the katana. But the Oni's bare feet slammed into the huge stallion's neck, launching it and Charles through a building. Charles' Inferno Titan horse rose up, and Charles himself manifested a thick burning chain made entirely out of flames before hurling it at the Oni. The Oni tilted its body, watching the flaming chain fly past it for a moment before lifting its leg up and stomping down on the chain, shattering it. It spun, unleashing a mana beam, a sharp crescent-shaped light from its katana which the Titan horse jumped over. The beam sliced through several houses, and they crumbled, raising dust. Godfrey, even while retreating, couldn't see the end of it. His pupils narrowed as mana gathered behind Charles, forming a huge Titan horse glowing like yellow flames, and it stomped down with its powerful hooves, shattering the asphalt road as fire burst forth. A sudden line appeared in the center of the projection, and it split into two parts. The Inferno Titan horse pulled the chariot, attempting to flee, but the Oni appeared above it with a downward kick, crashing the stallion's head into the asphalt. A huge crater opened as the Oni stood above the heavily wounded horse, whining weakly as it stared at its equally wounded summoner. But Charles' wounds were barely scratches compared to his summons. Charles rose to his feet, formed a spear out of fire, and dashed toward the Ronin, only to be kicked. The power of the kick launched him through a building as he crashed over 100 meters away, bloodied and heaving painfully. The Ronin shifted its attention back to the horse, but just then an orchid mantis, equally 9 feet tall, flashed toward the Ronin. Lotus, Godfrey's eyes went wide as the mantis burst into petals, evading the Oni's strike. It appeared behind it, swinging its sharp forelimbs at lightning speed, unleashing over 100 attacks in a second, but the Oni blocked all of it. It took a step to the side, lowering its torso and slashing at the mantis from a dangerous angle, but the mantis had nearly a 360 degrees vision angle. It burst into petals, appearing behind the Oni, only for the wakizashi to pierce through it. I can't withdraw my summon, Lotus panicked, watching from a distance as the Oni approached the mantis. Godfrey quickly realized it was because of the wakizashi. As the Oni lifted its katana, a golden diagram appeared before the mantis, and Mountain stepped out, instantly entering blackout state and transforming his shield into Achilles' shield. However, the katana, gleaming with a coating of mana, cut through the Achilles' shield with ease, slicing off Mountain's arm and opening a deep cut through the Knight Captain's cuirass. Blood spilled down the armor as the heavy shield, split into two, fell with a loud clanging sound, while Mountain fell on his knees before lifelessly dropping to the ground. Mountain, Godfrey roared at the top of his lungs. It all seemed surreal to him, veins bulged across his neck, his face turning crimson. Godfrey, Lotus grabbed him, pulling him away. They should have listened. Her summon pulled out the wakizashi, sped and took the two of them, but it only went so far due to the intense bleeding. Meanwhile, the Ronin remained in that same spot, looking at the dead knight from the eye holes in its metal mask. Before its very eyes, the knight disintegrated into golden motes of light. Godfrey stood in a desolate chamber. The once bright chamber was now dim. The pillars were broken, some lying on the floor. The walls were marred with cracks, and the stone throne was split into two, as if the chamber had suffered from an earthquake. Debris and stones were everywhere. With slow steps, he walked up to the wall, which had lots of carvings and writings. The moment he touched it, the wall cracked. A section of it fell, revealing the stone behind. Just then, motes of golden light appeared at the throne and began to multiply. As they did, the pillars went back into place. Debris, stones, cracks, everything returned to where they belonged, and the golden motes finally coalesced into Mountain. After being reformed, the Knight Captain fell on one knee, lowering his head. "Forgive my loss, Duke of the Sun." Godfrey averted his eyes from the huge knight on his knees to the wall, which was now brand new. He sighed in relief as he wiped his eyes. "I haven't cried in a long time." Godfrey, now isn't the time to be in shock. Godfrey, Lotus' voice echoed from the walls of the chamber, but only Godfrey could hear it. With a blink, he came back to the real world. His eyes adjusted to Lotus, who wasn't even looking at him but at his left. Godfrey tilted his head in that direction and saw the Oni Ronin immaculately walking toward them with slow yet purposeful steps. "Is Charles dead?" Godfrey asked as he stared at the Oni with a grim face. "I don't know," Lotus replied. "Outrunning this thing isn't possible either. I noticed you brought out a different summon. Does that mean the one that can summon an army is still in your soul space?" "I can't bring it out," Godfrey sighed. Mountain's resurrection had taken every ounce of mana he had. What he had gathered over the month since he came back from the school field trip was all gone. Lotus turned both arms into blades. "Then this will be the last thing we see." Even then, her tone didn't waver, but the Oni paused. Black mist came out from its side, and from it a man stepped out. He wore a t-shirt that hugged his well-established muscles, black pants and boots. This man looked to be in his mid-30s. "That's the summoner. He was in there all along. It's like a reverse, the summon carrying the summoner instead of the summoner carrying the summon," Godfrey thought inwardly. "I know that knight isn't dead," Arian said softly. Godfrey frowned. Lotus frowned. "What does he mean? I saw it die with my own eyes. I couldn't stop my summon mid-slash. You did appear in the way of my target, but I shall forgive them for shooting at me because they've harbored a kin." Arian turned around. "All that remains to leave this place is the dungeon boss. I want you to handle it." He turned to Godfrey. "In 3 days. I didn't kill the man you call Charles. You have her and the others at your hideout. 3 days to kill the dungeon boss is all it would take to ensure the survival of everyone here," Arian said solemnly. He tossed a white object at Godfrey, who let it fall first before taking it. Arian chuckled. "That's a portion of mana I expelled a while ago. It should help with your manaless body." As Arian spoke, the white object slowly became transparent as mana gushed into Godfrey's body. Not the kind needed for summon evolutions, but the kind absorbed for storage. So much mana packed into his body that it was equivalent to a year's worth of stored mana. Lotus could feel the mana from Godfrey. The mana in the air had been like a gentle breeze before, but now it was like a cyclone. "Why are you helping me?" "So you can resist a little more when the time comes, or I might have to kill you if we meet again, and you're either a fanatic or a pet of the authorities." Arian turned and began to walk away. 3 days, he recited. Back in the hideout, Falco and the others were stunned after Lotus explained what happened. Charles, who sat with mild injuries, coughed. "We should start making plans for the dungeon boss." A summoner with a manageable healing capability had been able to whip him into shape, but he was nowhere near his full capacity. If we take into account the rumor of a paradise where humanoid summoners are able to live in peace, the vagabond helping Godfrey makes sense, someone on the mezzanine said. Another man scowled. "It's just a rumor. All humanoid summoners will be dealt with." The vagabond killed 50 people. These humanoid summoners have an innate devil in them. Cain wanted to become a god, so he shed the blood of tens of millions that refused to worship him for 10 years. One of his followers almost wiped out Russia with the zombie plague. Others have developed a liking for feeding their humanoid summons beast summons. "We're basically food for them, how do you?" The man froze when he saw one of the guild members pointing a gun at him. His eyes trembled. What are you doing?" "He's the reason we're alive. Twice is a simple thank you too hard," the guild member frowned. The man looked at Falco, who had a placid expression. "We owe him. Once we get out of here, not a word about you will be spoken. And don't worry, we'll deal with the troublesome ones." Falco's words made the man shudder. Falco's mouth fell open as he watched 150 golden armored knights, 100 sword and shield knights and 50 bow knights, all marching as one. The thuds of their ironclad boots shook not just the earth, but the hearts of those watching with disbelief. Mountain stood before the first line made by the sword and shield knights. Ballista stood before the bow knights, while Tempest hovered above them, his lightning-like tendrils shining bright like the sun, reflecting off the armor of the knights. Everyone suddenly became sidelined, stunned at the array of knights. The bow knights were tier 5, the sword and shield tier 4, meaning there were 100 elite tier summon-worthy existences under Godfrey's command. He did say he could do it. But seeing it was a different matter entirely. "This is absurd," Falco gasped. "Who gave birth to this monster?" The man Godfrey beat up at the rooftop couldn't believe his eyes. Lotus couldn't even speak. A tri-summoner, Godfrey was a tri-summoner whose summons could also summon an army. Godfrey, Mrs. Joy gasped as she stared at Godfrey standing alone on the rooftop before all of them. Seeing him standing there, all she could see was Roland, superimposed on his son. Was this what Roland fought to preserve in this world? She watched as the Minotaurs roared and raised their weapons at the other side of the street. Their lines were chaotic, their crimson eyes gleamed with baleful light. A mighty roar came from their ranks, and the Minotaurs, about 260 of them, with the marauders at the forefront, charged at the disciplined line of the golden-armored knights. Tempest lifted one arm up, and a bright golden light blasted out, not as a beam but as a radiance, washing over the Minotaurs. "Die, you filth," declared Tempest with a solemn, heavy voice. The intensity of the light blinded them, and just then the bow knights fired their arrows. Projectiles of great size curved through the air, piercing through their tough skin. Not even the armored Minotaurs were spared. Their armor was pierced through by the huge arrows, and they were launched backward by the force. As tens of Minotaurs fell, some pulled out the arrows and hurled them at the shield wall, but even the arrows thrown with enough force to pierce through a stone wall bounced off Mountain's shield. Mountain raised his longsword high, and his knights charged, cloaks fluttering, as they collided with the Minotaurs. The knights couldn't overpower the Minotaurs in sheer strength, but their armor and skill gave them the advantage. A knight blocked the blow of an armored Minotaur, and another charged, slamming the great oval shield, forcing the knight backward. Just then the Minotaurs sensed something heavy approaching them, prompting them to turn. It was Mountain. He unleashed a Spartan kick on the first Minotaur, shattering its ribcage before deflecting the strike of the second orc and slapping it with his Achilles shield. As the battle proceeded, with the knights gaining ground, a sudden flock of crows attacked the sword and shield knights leading the charge. Their numbers were so great the knights were overwhelmed, and the Minotaurs saw this as an advantage. Just as they were about to take it, Tempest flew to the front line, two of his lightning tendrils stabbing into the asphalt road as if to ensure his landing. All the Minotaurs around turned toward the chief knight, who, with a swing of his 6-foot-long greatsword, tore 5 Minotaurs apart. Tempest brandished his greatsword and dashed toward the demon Horn, a 10-foot-tall Minotaur with a thick, heavy-looking fur coat. It lifted its huge axe but first sent crows at Tempest. The chief knight, with a flap of his wings, flew above the flock that came like a dark cloud, landing right in the spot the demon Horn had stood. But it leaped off and swung the great axe, only for Tempest, who in blackout state was a 7.7 high-tier summon, to grab it with one hand, his golden eyes burning into the Minotaur which towered over him. In the next moment, he plunged his greatsword through Demon Horn. The mini-boss roared, trying to slam its horns into Tempest, but the knight grabbed the greatsword's handle with both hands, lifting the 10-foot-tall Minotaur into the air. The blade sank deeper, and it suddenly shone with lightning, frying the Minotaur until it became black. Other Minotaurs that tried attacking Tempest while he focused on Demon Horn were fried into skeletons by his tendril wings. Just as Demon Horn lost all signs of life, Ash Horn appeared behind it, swinging its sledgehammer packed with magma so hot the earth blackened and cracked beneath Tempest. Its ferocious attack never reached the target, as an arrow packed with lightning pierced through its chest before Ash Horn could react. A huge hole appeared on the mini-boss's chest as it staggered backward and fell. "Those two are stronger than the mini-bosses," Lotus gasped. "Where's the boss?" Godfrey muttered, squinting. His eyes scanned the battle before locking on the lone Minotaur walking toward the battlefield with an axe. With each step it grew bigger and bigger. The core which was chained to its chest became quite small when the Minotaur grew to a towering 20 feet, its axe adjusting to its size. Khan lifted its axe high and swung it down, splitting the street into two. Ballista unleashed a trail blazer, but Khan tanked the blow without any damage. It only grinned, growing 1 extra foot. Mountain charged at the Khan, also growing to a gigantic size. He lifted Achilles' shield, but the Khan's axe cut halfway through. However, this gave Mountain the space to thrust his longsword, though it couldn't go deep. Even when Mountain could copy the Khan's innate skill, he still wasn't an 8.1 Lord-tier summon. A kick launched Mountain into a building, crushing it entirely. Tempest lifted his greatsword with both hands as he hovered above the boss. As Tempest swung the greatsword downward, the earth split like an earthquake ran through the street. The Khan staggered backward as one arm fell heavily to the ground, and he reduced from 21 feet to 19. Tempest flew to his head, plunging his greatsword through the middle of both horns, while his wings stabbed the Khan's eyes, roasting everything within its head. Lightning crackled intensely as the clouds opened and golden bolts fell, landing directly on Tempest and spreading down to the feet of the gigantic entity he was on top of. Everyone watched with varying expressions as the boss dropped to the ground, reducing back to 10 feet tall, and the chief knight was on one knee beside the fallen boss, lightning bouncing off the earth and jumping back to him as he rose to his feet with a grunt. That skill, Godfrey's eyes gleamed. I'll call it Lightning Descent, and I'll call the other one Earth Divider. Sounds decent enough. Even after this intense battle, he felt all right. This was a new experience. Before, after a fight, Godfrey would always feel a drop in his reserved mana, but now, that feeling was non-existent. Far away on a rooftop, Arian stood beside his summon, the Oni Ronin. Such a monster, even in paradise he's unprecedented, and that other one, he's also a great talent, but loves hiding. Arian stared at Percival, who stood beside his mother. Godfrey blinked as he found himself back in the underground parking lot with Percival, his mother, and others. His eyes slowly adjusted to the security guards and other worried people rushing into the parking lot. Amongst them was his mother. When she reached him, Valentina first held his face, then proceeded to check other parts of his body for injuries before embracing him tightly. They said Kane's fanatics were in there, she said while hugging him. Suddenly she turned to the girl who tapped her. It was Gwen. I thought he was her son. Are you his real mother? Gwen said, pointing at Mrs. Joy. Valentina was surprised for a moment, but eventually nodded. Well, your son saved all of us. Valentina saw the expressions on other people's faces, and they all contained gratitude. The security men looked at Godfrey with raised eyebrows. All the guild teams they had sent in there, and it was this kid who rescued them. Feeling awkward, Godfrey turned to Percival, who looked away without a thought. The authorities sent their men along with some combatants from the Pagoda Guild. Didn't you meet them? The head security asked. They're dead, Gwen's reply shocked all of them. I think he's called a vagabond. He killed them and also killed all of Kane's fanatics. The security guards shuddered at the thought. Valentina paced around her bedroom, her face tense as she waited for the call to connect. When it finally did, a deep masculine voice came from the other end of the phone. We've looked into it. Your son does indeed possess humanoid summons, a dual summoner, according to data. He will be sent for readjustment class. I won't allow it. I made sure you investigate it now so I can make it clear that the authorities should keep their hands and feet far away from my son. Do you hear me? Ma'am, he will return to school after his classes are over and will not work for us immediately. Get close to Godfrey and I'll kill myself, Valentina said firmly, and a tense silence took over for a while. We will turn a blind eye to your son. No readjustment class for him. He will be the only humanoid summoner we shall allow to roam free, no matter the circumstances. But you shall keep your part of the bargain. Once your summon clocks 30, we shall harvest its heart. The voice sank deep into Valentina's soul. Yet she smiled, a smile filled with pain. But if that's what it would take for the authorities to keep a blind eye on her son, she would gladly take it. I know, Valentina replied. You know, once your summon reaches 30 years, its heart can bring anyone, human or summon, back to life, even if all that remains is just a bone or dust. Giving it to us is a better way, and it would give us peace, as many would want to have their hands on what could bring back the long dead. Both you and your son will be taken care of. Rest easy. Valentina dropped the phone, her heart pounding intensely. A portal appeared beside her bed, and from it, a huge stag whose horns touched the ceiling stepped out. Its gentle blue eyes locked on Valentina, and it lowered its head, trying to offer comfort. Valentina made it crouch and began to caress its pristine white body, her eyes occasionally glancing at the blue glowing veins along its horns. This summon had been with her right from when she was 10 years old. They were more than the mainstream master and servant relationship, more like best friends. There was a sudden knock, and the door swung open, revealing Godfrey. White, he beamed, as the stag rose to its feet, excitedly approaching him. White, be careful or you'll destroy the ceiling, Valentina cautioned. 2 weeks later, Godfrey sat on a bench in the gym with a pair of gloves he was about to strap on. It was quite late and this large gym had few people. Not far from him on another bench sat Percival, strapping a pair of gloves. I've created a club. It's called Shadow Club, and our main priority will be dungeon hunting. The number of dungeons is increasing, and we've been in 3 these past 2 weeks. Percival looked at Godfrey. I saw it. It was on the notice board everywhere in school. Everyone would have heard of it before they left. I heard the school now has a Shadow King, and I instantly knew it was you. Percival looked at his gloved hands. You can't stop what's going on, Godfrey. People with strength beat and oppress the weak. Those weak do the same when they find someone weaker, and the cycle keeps repeating. It was a trait birthed during the apocalyptic period. Godfrey rose to his feet. It won't happen to those in the Shadow Club, and will help at least make Manhattan less toxic. Percival looked at the bold, golden-haired teenager with a solemn gaze. You're going to face not just Nexus Club but the seniors. There's Damien, the ex-king, and Tyler, the ex-queen, and they're even worse than John. They're from powerful families like John. They've got the support of the upper echelons, and not even the school management will help you. They'd rather cover it up or get discredited. Godfrey walked up to him, wearing a taunting smile. So what? Is that why, despite having the strength, you've remained in hiding? You're too docile, Percival. But there's no need for you to step into the light. Let me handle that. He stretched his hand to Percival. While you watch my back as my ace, within school grounds, the strongest rules. We take that from them and they'll have to bow. You want me to become your shadow ace? I'll think about it, Percival replied, holding his hand and rising to his feet. Both of them went to the fighting mat, where golden plates appeared on Godfrey's arms, while blue scales appeared on Percival's. Percival closed in by throwing a punch that sent Godfrey skidding backward until he reached the edge of the mat. Such strength, it's beyond what John showed, Godfrey thought as he launched at Percival, throwing his own punch. Man, Percival packs a punch, Godfrey groaned as he sat in a tube full of icy water, leaning his head back so he could see the ceiling. His ocean blue eyes gleamed as he remembered their fight. Percival was indeed strong, strong enough to go head-on with him in his full boxing mode. After pondering for a while, Godfrey shut his eyes and appeared in Mountain's chamber. After Mountain rose to his peak 6, his chamber suddenly lost its brightness, and even he couldn't enter for the past 2 weeks, but now he was allowed in. Godfrey stared at the 8-foot-tall knight seated on the stone throne. Mountain had changed. Not only did he grow bulkier, a sign that he gained a lot of solid muscle mass, but the fan-shaped crest atop his great helm now had a short grey plume like a brush. The insignia of a sword and shield had changed. It now had a spear right in the middle. Mountain rose to his feet, looking much bigger than before as he lifted up his Achilles shield, hung his longsword at his back, and took hold of the long golden spear, almost 4 meters tall. As if yearning to show him his new capability, Mountain assumed a stance, and his Achilles shield grew slightly bigger, with root-like designs spreading out to the edge. It looked thicker and a bit darker than the Achilles shield. Mountain slammed the shield with his spear, and the roots gleamed softly. He kept slamming it and finally struck the shield into the ground. The stone floor exploded in ripples as a force burst out, destroying a pillar until it reached the wall. It can absorb blows and retaliate with the same force. Godfrey couldn't finish his ponder when, at Mountain's silent command, the shield became a golden dome. It still had the design of the shield but was more translucent, and it covered him. Godfrey touched the translucent dome. It was cold to the touch but strangely solid. It didn't look like it, but it felt like metal. This skill had to be a higher form of an adaptive skill. It surpassed advanced, as that was where Achilles' shield stood. This was an ascendant skill. Bastion, Godfrey muttered. That's what I'll call your new shield. Mountain retrieved the shield. The dome vanished as Bastion reappeared in its metal form. What about your spear? Can it do? Godfrey's eyes widened as the spear suddenly elongated, swooshing past him. The 4-meter-long spear had grown to 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Amazed, Godfrey took the tablet to check out Mountain's new build. Summon, Knight Captain of the Golden Order. Type, Hybrid. Tier 6. Potential, 7.2. Description, all-round heavy infantry captain, leader of the greatest heavy infantry. Possesses a great round shield able to protect citadels and crumble terrains, a spear capable of elongating to great lengths, and a longsword for close combat. Granted a Titan's strength and can copy 3 skills at once in blackout state. You broke past your limits, quite easily, Godfrey said, blinking several times. He knew how rare and lucky it was for a summon to break past its limits and become a higher version of itself, but all he did was increase Mountain to his peak, and the evolution began on its own. Like he once thought, it seemed like he was simply raising some of these knights back to their true strength. What should have taken a lucky encounter or years took just 4 months and 3 weeks since he awakened. I've been learning how to wield a sword from Tempest. Lift your spear, let's have a spar, Godfrey said. Just then, Tempest opened the doors to Mountain's chamber with Ballista by his side. Ballista looked at Tempest, who slowly lowered his head. As they predicted, Godfrey was sent into a pillar in one strike. Mountain's teaching methods were rather extreme. Semester break was finally over, and students returned to school. On the first day when class began, 2 luxury cars rode into the school, and even amongst the many, they were in a league of their own. An 18-year-old boy came out from the first car, wearing simple glasses, his hair neatly combed back. A girl of similar age came out of the second car, her ink-black hair gleaming attractively as it fell down her back. The boy in glasses was Damien, the ex-king, and the girl, Tyler, slim and elegant, was the ex-queen. Damien glanced at Tyler and turned to face the school. Countless students whispered to themselves, their eyes never leaving the 2 individuals. "It's Damien, my god, he looks cool. Tyler is still enchanting. I think she's going to be a model. Such long legs and charm are too good to end up in a dungeon as a combatant," another female student said. "Haven't you seen videos of her fighting? It's as elegant as a dance." Amongst the large influx of students were Janet and the gum girl. "I don't think Godfrey will last this semester. The ex-rulers are stronger than the current ones, and they won't stand for rebellion." Janet glanced at the pair who were making their way to their section, which was away from theirs, with some other seniors, all of whom she couldn't deny looked cool. But when she recalled what she saw that morning and the headmaster telling her to keep silent, Janet sighed. "There are monsters beyond monsters," Janet said. "What's that supposed to mean?" Gum Girl shouted and suddenly held her mouth. The crowd suddenly became rowdy once again, prompting Janet to look back. Walking into the boulevard, her eyes narrowed as she saw a golden-haired teen walking into the school in a white, thick leather jacket with a fur collar. A backpack slung over one shoulder, his hands buried in the jacket's pockets. Beside him was a pale blue-haired student wearing a nose mask. Both of them walking side by side was a killer to the females, especially with the news circulating that there was an official Shadow King in Manhattan. Who was this blue-haired student? Where had such a good-looking student been, and no one knew about it? Godfrey's changed, Janet thought as she watched Godfrey walk past her with a placid expression. She didn't get the feeling of a handsome boy walking past her, but of a leader detached, yet somehow connected. It was strange. It was the weight of a king felt by a subject. Godfrey halted at the door of his classroom, eyes locked on Isolde, who was chatting with Lucy. Now that he had grown much stronger, he couldn't understand how a girl bench-pressing a ton with relative ease could still look elegant. It amazed him because, in this 1-month break, the great amount of mana in his body had amplified the effects of his training, adding extra flesh to his biceps, triceps, and chest. He now had the kind of build numbers like John, Yuan, and Percival were known for, rivaling quite a lot of seniors. A perfect build, some might call it, because this was achieved through compression. Some students like Dale used their mana to increase their muscle mass while training, allowing them to look buff and bigger than the rest. While caught up in his thoughts, Lucy saw him, her eyes widening as she tapped Isolde, who turned and followed her gaze. "Are you going to keep standing there?" Edwin's voice made Godfrey move to his seat as others scrambled to theirs. As he sat down, Godfrey turned to the golden white-haired girl. She rolled her eyes at Godfrey, who crossed his arms and leaned backward. "Is it me, or does Godfrey look even better?" Orwin whispered to Dale. Dale scowled. "What do you mean?" Orwin pointed at the girl's reactions to Godfrey. It wasn't rowdy, but it was noticeable. "It's like he got some kind of glow-up from a beautifying summoner." "He does radiate a different energy," Cecil confirmed with a quick glance. Snow was the final student to walk into the class, and straight to his seat without a word as eyes followed him. His spot as the #1 most handsome boy in his class was still undisputed, despite Godfrey's glow-up, due to his body growth kick-started by the 1 year's worth of mana within his muscles, blood, and organs. Edwin coughed, gaining everyone's attention. "Now, we're going to have a cool class this morning." Saying this, Edwin took a chair and sat before the class with one leg crossed over the other. "After this semester, you all will be moving on to your junior year. You'll be one step into the world. That's one of the reasons we'll be having a broad conversation about Earth." He paused to make sure the class was following before continuing. "What do you know about the first summoner, Adam?" Edwin tilted his head. Lucy raised her hand. "His summon, the Monkey King, has a staff that could reach the clouds and could be as big as a skyscraper in its fully expanded form. I believe that was one of the outstanding feats known about Adam and his summon. Edwin nodded. What else? It could transform into other summons or whatever it faced, use the skills of what it transformed into, and could multiply itself, with each copy being able to defeat King Tears. I believe that's what made the Monkey King the strongest summon ever, Snow said with a laid-back posture. That's a good one, but does that make the Monkey King a King Tier? Edwin's question puzzled everyone as they looked at each other. I did a little research and discovered that the tier King was actually derived from the king in the name Monkey King, but the summon itself was never said to be a King Tier because, back then, tiers didn't exist. Edwin rose up. One man and one summon stopped the Great Despair, an apocalyptic event that plunged the entire world into darkness, wiping out over 1 billion. Yet such a catastrophe was stopped by one summoner who fought against hundreds of King Tier dungeon bosses, all of which were not sealed in dungeons. Isolde's eyes gleamed. Has it been authorized to tell people about this? Researchers have said that indeed the prisoner of the golden headband is beyond the capacity of a King Tier. The same thing for Cain's Dark Seraph, a summon capable of giving summons to ordinary humans, making them summoners. It could also add to a summoners, which was why Cain had a terrifying army of dual and tri-summoners, Edwin continued. Godfrey's eyes narrowed at the absurdity of such a skill. Everyone had different expressions. Those that had heard of it before were less shocked. It could also bring darkness, a darkness where no source of light works. Even the flames of summons vanished within it, like those flames didn't exist. Edwin stopped abruptly, a smile appearing on his face as he saw the expressions of his students. The despair you feel before such strength is a testament to the theory of tiers currently beyond humanity, but our world is still growing. Soon, dungeons with creatures beyond King Tier will appear, and when that happens, we shall figure out the secret behind Adam's disappearance. Other tiers will be discovered, and maybe we shall see other gates, like the white one Adam entered and never returned. When will all this happen? Godfrey asked. In a century or so. The earth will be properly saturated by then, and the numbers of King Tiers will have risen. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. We'll all be dead by then, Dale chortled. Possibly, but the number of dungeons rising is a sign of what's to come, Cain fanatics' interference or not. So now you're all spooked, better study hard for this semester. He walked to the board and began listing types of beasts and their traits. Later on in the Shadow Club, Lucy sighed. So there are more tiers, and I'm stuck at the lowest of them all. Isaac frowned. You might be a low tier, but your potential is above it, right? Lucy shook her head. My summon's potential is 3.4, the peak of low tier, and I'm currently at 3.3. Isaac was stumped, unable to say a word, as there was nothing he could do to change her summon's potential. Godfrey patted Lucy's head with a warm smile. You've got your brains, and we won't judge you based on your tier. Seeing Godfrey's smile, Lucy felt light. Just then the door opened, and they all looked at it, expecting a potential new member, but it was Tank, number 10 in Nexus Club, who did. As he strode in, the triplets, Ulrich, Wulfric and Leofric, entered after him. Isolde rose to her feet. Get out. Ulrich chuckled, both hands buried in his pockets. This club should be closed, or it will not end lightly. Isolde's eyes gleamed. Are you threatening us? We know if you touch a single one of us, your parents are going to drag you back home, away from your boyfriend here, Leofric smirked. We'll keep breaking a limb or two until he publicly apologizes to John, Tank said with a deep voice, while the second of the triplets, Wulfric, leaned against the wall. The temperature in the room dropped to the negatives instantly. Ice began creeping on the walls and floor. Just then John walked into the room with Yuan, Lilith, and Edric. His eyes were locked on Isolde, totally disregarding Godfrey and the other members of the Shadow Club. Why are you going against me? You banned Godfrey and we created a club. How's that going against you? Isaac spoke up. Shut up, Leofric retorted fiercely, about to take a step when a hand held his shoulder from behind. Percival walked past him and sat on a desk, staring at the rest of the Nexus Club members. It would be best for all of you to leave. John frowned, his eyes finally resting on Godfrey before he left, grinding his teeth. Lilith snorted, flipped her hair, and left along with the rest of the Nexus Club. After walking for a while, John stopped in the middle of the corridor. Ulrich, deal with the freshman, and Lilith. Speak no more, I'll deal with the girl, Lilith replied. Good, this should push Isolde to act, and I'll make sure she doesn't return to this school. We'll deal with the troublesome sophomore after all three are gone. Everyone nodded. After school, Isaac strolled back to the dormitory, and he saw the freshmen that once bullied him lingering around his path. When they saw him, they blocked the way. "Is this a joke?" Isaac tilted his head as he threw his bag to the ground, but his expression changed as the king's hounds emerged from the group of bullies. "God, this will be fun," Leofric grinned. Lucy emerged from a taxi with two of her friends some hours after school. They were out for a get-together at New Korea Town for karaoke. "Hey Lucy, do you think it's good being friends with people like Godfrey? I mean, his summons sliced off the arm of your crab," one of her friends said spitefully. "He also saved me from drowning. I would have died in there." Lucy's voice rose a little. That's true," her second friend said, shaking her head with a pout. "But isn't your friendship with them costing you a little too much? Sam is your father's favorite, and he'll keep making your life a hell. I mean, you went to the hospital twice during the break because of home accidents, which we both know weren't accidents," the first friend said innocently. "And I'm sure you didn't tell Godfrey and Isolde because at most, they'll beat Sam, but that will only make your dad loathe you even more. I honestly don't see ya." "Enough," Lucy yelled, glaring at both of them. "Is that why you brought me here to say all this?" One of them shook her head. "We're just worried. Oh, this is our room, let's just sing and forget about this." Lucy snorted but broke into a smile. The moment the door was opened, she saw Lilith sitting with one leg crossed over the other. "Hi, sweetheart, this is my dad's place." Lilith smiled, waving her fingers at her. Lucy's expression changed. She took a step backward but saw Edric and Tank walking from both sides of the corridor. Icy mist billowed out of Edric's hands. "Get in." "We'll be in the next room." One of Lucy's friends smiled, pulling the other to the other room with soft giggles. They were all at the bottom. Why did Lucy have to become friends with an unreachable goddess like Isolde and a strong and dependable boy like Godfrey? What's worse was that she didn't even introduce them. Lilith smiled as she stared at the trembling Lucy. "Shadow Sage, what a strong title. I don't see what's so sage about a low-tier crab summoner whose only achievement is being able to breathe underwater a little longer." She couldn't even do that right. Edric slammed his fist into Lucy's face, but Tank held her in place. "Will you tell your teacher?" Lilith blinked. Lucy shook her head vehemently. "Good, you're not important. We just want to send a message to Godfrey, so..." Flames engulfed Lilith's palm, reflecting in Lucy's eyes. In the other room, both girls pressed their ears against the wall, but still couldn't hear a thing. "I bet she's begging with those large eyes filled with tears, as she usually does." One of them scowled. "If she reports to Godfrey, what will happen to us?" the second asked grimly. "Can't you see Nexus Club is out for them? Godfrey is next, and even if she does, we'll report to her father and make her life at home hell," the first replied. "Also, Lilith said she'll make sure we join her girls' club, and we'll have enough cause to reach the peak of our potential." Both girls squealed in delight. The next day, Godfrey stood in the nurse's office, staring at Isaac and Lucy, who were on the sick beds. Both of them were healed, but he heard of how Lucy was found beaten unconscious at a place far from the school. The management of the center had to call the school when they saw her ID. At least her injuries were totally gone, but Isaac had scars on his body. Isolde flashed toward the door, but someone stood right beside it, blocking it with a golden trident. "Get out of my way," Isolde glared at Percival, who met her gaze. "You're also a target. They might not be able to put you on a sickbed, but they can send you out of school, and we don't know how that will end up." Godfrey took a stool and sat between both beds. "I'm sorry," he said to both Isaac and Lucy, who were taken aback. "It's not your fault, Godfrey," Lucy said, while Isaac nodded. "They're not going to get away with it, though." "Of course not." Godfrey smiled at them, rose to his feet, and leaped out of the window, to the nurse's shock. "This is the third floor." Isaac was dumbfounded, while Percival lowered his trident. "He's king. We'll act only if he's overwhelmed." "I don't think anyone's overwhelmed by a guy that jumped off the third floor," Isaac said aloud. Meanwhile outside, Godfrey dropped to the paved ground, cracking the blocks beneath his feet as he bent a little. His eyes locked on the Nexus Club members seated on the bleachers across the large field, without a strand of warmth. Across the field, Lilith sat with Rowana and Usable on a bleacher. Around her and the other top school beauties were the other members of Nexus Club, all except the king and his knight. No other student, not even fellow third years, dared to sit on the same bleacher as them. They all admired from afar as the elites of the school conversed amongst themselves. "Isn't that Godfrey?" Lilith followed Rowana's gaze. and her eyes locked on Godfrey walking toward them from the other end of the vast field. "Oh look, he comes crawling," she giggled. Others on the bleachers, Edric the hounds and Tank, chuckled, but as Godfrey came halfway, they discovered his expression was as cold as frost. His eyes narrowed, those ocean blue pupils piercing at them like a raging sea. He'd already thrown off his jacket, revealing his muscles that pressed slightly against his white shirt, which was already folded to the elbow. It was clear Godfrey was coming for a fight. The students having fun on the field cleared the path for him, watching with raised eyebrows. Was Godfrey crazy enough to go head-on with Nexus Club? They'd all heard of Isaac and Lucy. In fact, it was published that morning, and everyone took note to stay clear of Shadow Club. "Leave him to me," Tank said, flexing his massive body before bolting toward Godfrey. The hide of a rhino covered his skin as a horn grew out of his forehead. Lightning crackled from his head to his feet as his massive size shot through the field, throwing a powerful punch that slammed into Godfrey, raising a huge amount of dust that enveloped them for a second. It only took one hit. Did this dude seriously walk up here just to be crushed by Tan? Edric's eyes widened as the dust cleared, revealing that Tank's great punch was caught by Godfrey. The sophomore didn't even take one step back, nor did he look bothered. Godfrey twisted Tank's arm, and the huge boy's face distorted. A swift punch to his chin sent him into the air. Nobody could believe their eyes, but before Tank could land, Godfrey caught him, hurling him toward the bleachers. Tank crashed through it, leaving a hole behind. The hounds dashed out, long claws blazing with hellfire. Godfrey assumed a boxing stance, evading Ulrich's claw swipe with swift footwork. He threw a straight punch to Ulrich's cheek, and like a bullet, Ulrich was sent flying with great speed back into the bleachers and right through it. Wulfric and Leofric gasped, eyes widening as they felt the air ripple from the raw power radiating from Godfrey's fist alone. With a malicious gaze, Leofric pushed forward from the side, aiming to cut open Godfrey's thighs, but his face was greeted with a knee. It struck his chin, lifting him up, and Godfrey slammed a punch into Leofric's face. The force at which Leofric hit the field tore off the grass and opened a small crater. Wulfric thought of unleashing his summon, but it would get him suspended. With no other choice, he breathed out hellish flames from his mouth, but Godfrey flickered out of the way, appearing by his side. Before Wulfric could think, Godfrey's fist connected with his cheek. His flesh rippled as he was launched across the field, crashing into the ground several times before rolling to a stop before the goalpost. Students had gathered, watching from their windows. Those on the field couldn't believe it. Rowana held her mouth, her eyes as wide as they could be, while her heart pounded with fear. "He's taking them out with a single blow," Usable gasped in horror. Edric rose to his feet, along with Lilith as Godfrey turned his eyes to them, 4 Nexus Club members already in an unconscious state from his blows. "Even if I can't bring my summon here, don't think I can't handle you," Lilith snapped as her hair became flames, with a large amount of heat billowing off her. Knowing what she was about to do, Rowana and Usable fled with some other students. "We should stop this now, or Godfrey might not survive," Evangeline said to Sebastian, who calmly watched from his floor-to-ceiling window as Lilith unleashed a torrent of flames on Godfrey from her hands. Before Sebastian could reply, the flames shot upward like a pillar of fire before dispersing, revealing Godfrey. Some parts of his white shirt had burnt, but he looked different now. The sclera of his eyes had become black while his pupils turned golden. His hair became blue flames, same for his hands, as his strength rose from 7 to 8. Evangeline gasped at the sight. Her eyes widened even more at the number in her gauge. 8 on his own, he's a Lord Tier. There's no way that kid isn't already beyond a dual summoner. He must be hiding a third, Sebastian said, narrowing his eyes. Finally, someone will teach these kids to stay within limits. A fellow student, and I see no wrong in that. Blue flames, Usable frowned as Godfrey blasted flames from his hand. It collided with Lilith's flames and began to overpower her yellow flames. He copied Lilith's skill and made it even stronger. This bastard. Edric stood before Lilith and summoned a wall of ice, sending a huge wave of it from his left toward Godfrey. Godfrey leaped, landing on top of the ice as blue flames condensed in the middle of his palm until they were almost purple and the size of a tennis ball, something he'd learned from watching Isolde do it. It took a lot of mana, but now that Godfrey had a year's worth, he was like a tiger given wings. The weakness Snow had spotted was gone. The flame ball burst out like a bullet, leaving behind a bluish-purple streak as it collided with Edric's reinforced shield. The ice shield exploded, shards melting into nothing as the force blasted Edric into the bleachers. Lilith escaped by sprouting bat-like wings and covering her body with red scales. She protected herself with the wings, and by the time she opened them, Godfrey was before her. Lilith's eyes went wide, but a punch greeted her cherished face, launching her into Usable. Both of them tore through the air at high speed, hitting several other third-year students and leaving them sprawled on the grass. Godfrey ascended the bleachers and stared down at Edric, who stood up from his hole. The upperclassman's eyes met Godfrey's black sclera and unforgiving golden pupils. This was blackout state. Godfrey lifted up his fist, billowing with icy mist, and held Edric's neck with the hand that was engulfed with flames. Fear seized the junior's heart so much that he couldn't even form a word. His neck burned, yet his irises were locked on the incoming icy fist that had launched people across 100 yards. What would it do to him when he was being pinned in place? It was death. Just as Edric was about to open a portal for his summon, as his life was on the line, someone yelled, "Godfrey!" Hearing his name, Godfrey tilted his head and found John with his knight. Yuan is a genius in combat. His battle awareness has always been on the high side from a young age. "I'm afraid Godfrey has met his match," Sebastian said solemnly. On the field, both of them locked eyes, anger and hate swelled within, and at the same time, they dashed forward. Godfrey toward John. John toward Godfrey. Godfrey covered a greater distance, throwing a punch that tore through the air, but instead of hitting flesh, it moved right through smoke as John reappeared behind him. A white, translucent projection of a 7-foot-tall weasel standing on its 2 feet, with bone blades for arms, flared to life beside him. It swung its bone blades, slicing off Godfrey's right forearm even after Godfrey, through instinct, covered himself in golden armor. "I promised to take off that arm," John coldly said inwardly. The mana construct lifted its right blade and struck down, but Godfrey burst into smoke. Projection, a skill that allowed the summoner to manifest a spectral construct of the summon, which would also have the same tier as the main summon, but consumed quite a great amount of mana. What Godfrey faced was an 8.3 Lord tier summon, with terrifying speed and lethality. While many students held their mouths in shock at the sight of Godfrey's severed forearm, John's eyes followed the black smoke Godfrey had turned into. "Good, he has copied my skill. No one knows how to use that skill better than me, and turning into smoke doesn't last long." The moment John came to that conclusion, Godfrey reappeared, but a small bluish-purple flame ball was already in the center of his left palm. John's eyes widened as Godfrey launched it. Midway, a translucent grey wolf jumped into the flame ball's path and swallowed it. Smoke came out of its fangs. It lunged at Godfrey, swinging its paw, which Godfrey leaped backward to dodge. Seizing the opportunity of being in his blind spot, Yuan, already covered in wolf fur and looking like a grey werewolf, charged. Due to the amount of blood already spilled, he was growing stronger and stronger by the second, and so he clawed at Godfrey's back. Godfrey twisted his body, lightning crackling off him. The claw grazed his back, ripping through his armor and flesh, but his blackout eyes still didn't waver despite the pain. He was already lost to his rage. His gauntleted fist struck Yuan's chin, launching the 7-foot-tall werewolf man into the air, blood trailing after him. A massive amount of smoke moved toward him like a tide, and 2 smoke-like bone blades came out of it. Godfrey fired a flame ball in return, but even after a huge portion of the smoke was vaporized, he couldn't see John. However, something else came out, the white, translucent projection of John's summon. It darted toward him at hyper-speed, slashing at him several times, but Godfrey evaded, both of them flickering from one spot to another. Most people couldn't even follow the battle. The wolf lunged once more, forcing Godfrey to manifest and throw 3 flame balls, which blew off the wolf's head. He spun in a clockwise direction, the same direction the weasel projection swung its blade, so instead of cutting him, the blade merely grazed him as Godfrey's roundhouse kick struck its head, launching it through the smoke and into the bleachers. "I must admit you're strong," Yuan said as he approached Godfrey. Meanwhile, John hid in a wall of smoke that swirled around Godfrey and Yuan. Godfrey knew Yuan was waiting to take away another of his limbs. All it would take was just for him to put down his guard, and that was what Yuan wanted to achieve. "But you're fighting the wrong person. Don't let us destroy you," Yuan said, stretching forth his hand to offer one last chance of grace. "Apologize to the king, and we..." No, Godfrey's reply was instant. Well then, I grow stronger once blood is spilled, and you are constantly spilling blood. You can't win. It's impossible, Yuan growled, his size increasing to 9 feet. His fur grew tougher, his fangs and claws hard enough to slice through an 8 defense lord tier. This was what made Yuan the number 2. He might not start great, but he always ended the victor as long as there was blood, and Godfrey's lost limb gave him plenty of it. Yuan charged at Godfrey and threw a kick at him. To his shock, Godfrey leaned toward the kick, blocking it with the shoulder of the arm that had lost its forearm. Pain assaulted him, but his blackout eyes narrowed in. Mountain could copy 3 skills at once. He had never used ice since, meaning there was one more slot for a skill that he had copied but kept secret. Yuan's blood growth. His strength had surpassed 8, climbing up to the ranks of 8.4. His fist lurched forth, slamming into Yuan's chest. The upperclassman's ribcage cracked and shattered. A huge dent made by Godfrey's fist, etching itself into Yuan's chest. The force of the punch sent Yuan like a bullet from a sniper's gun, right into the wall beyond the field. Black smoke burst out of him, transforming into a black mini-tornado which collapsed suddenly, billowing outward in all directions, huge amounts of black smoke, over 10 feet tall. John found himself in the darkness, with Godfrey's golden irises locked on him. Godfrey was on his knees, supporting himself with one hand while panting heavily. You're at your limit. John transformed his hands into bone blades. He flickered, appearing before Godfrey, only for Godfrey to dissolve into smoke. John turned back and around, his eyes narrowing. How could Godfrey support such a large amount of smoke? In that instant, a cold hand clamped around his throat from behind, lifting him off the ground. John dissolved out of Godfrey's grasp and reappeared a few meters away. Defeating Godfrey looked impossible, but within this smoke, no one knew what was happening unless they were a King Tier, and not even the headmaster was King Tier yet. A portal appeared beside him, and his summon, the White Dearth Weasel, an 8-foot-tall streamlined creature with white fur and bone blades that reached the floor, stepped out. Just then, in that exact moment, as if it were all calculated, the black smoke swirling in great amounts dispersed, exposing John, who couldn't believe his eyes. He had thought once Godfrey fell, he would retrieve his summon. This was the first time he had taken such an underhanded tactic, but Godfrey was even more cunning than him. The eyes of the whole school were on him, the king who had to reveal his summon to bring down a sophomore that single-handedly wiped out the royalties of Manhattan High. John's prestige crumbled like a pack of cards. The damage pierced deeper than taking a blow. At least being defeated honorably was better than this. His bloodshot eyes locked on Godfrey with hatred down to his very bones. Since he was already exposed, what was holding him back? He'd lost everything. As the weasel raised its bone blades, 3 diagrams appeared beside and above Godfrey. Mountain, Tempest, and Ballista all emerged in blackout states, crimson-armored with black cloaks. What? John couldn't believe his eyes. I guess we have a new king. Sebastian crossed his arms while Evangeline couldn't believe what she saw. Can you see? Percival said, wiping the blood trickling down the cut at his forehead, while staring at Isolde, who stood with her fist clenched, inside the nurse office, which had been destroyed countless of times, but the damage had been reversed so she couldn't get out. He's still standing. The whole school can see. It would not have been the same if you had helped. Percival huffed as Isolde's animosity died down. Godfrey, you owe me. Percival hissed inwardly while Isaac, Lucy and the school nurse Julia cowered in fear out the raging fight that went on in here after Isolde saw Godfrey lose his arm. If Percival did not have 2 summons, he would have been dead. The unexpected incident that shocked Godfrey after the fight was that Yuan was found dead. But at great cost and with quick response, Yuan was revived. However, Godfrey was suspended for an entire month. After an entire month, he was back in school. As Godfrey approached the building, he saw countless heads looking out the window, their eyes wide with awe and shock, as though a legendary King Tier had just walked into their school. He's back. OMG, Godfrey's back. I get he's infamous now, but he's the only tri-summoner in Manhattan, and strong as heck. The entire place was rowdy with conversations, some girls ogling him. I don't think there's anything scarier than an angry Godfrey, Orwin remarked. Did you see how his eyes became black and gold? Godfrey was out of it, a sophomore girl said. He brought down the tyranny of the royalties. Why weren't they suspended too? Cecil shot Lucy a cold glance, because he killed someone. You mean almost killed, Isolde countered, glancing at Cecil. Everyone looked at each other. Meanwhile, Godfrey met Edwin in the corridor. You're needed at the headmaster's office, Edwin said, his arms crossed. Is it because I came late? Godfrey asked, perplexed. Edwin sighed, it's not. The moment Godfrey entered the headmaster's office, he spotted an Asian man and a red-haired woman sitting before the headmaster. There was another teacher in the room, the junior teacher, Gregory. When they saw him, their faces distorted. The man dashed toward him, grabbing his collar and glaring at him. You're going to regret what you did to my son. Godfrey sighed, I didn't mean to go that far. Edwin, who held the man's hand while trying to separate them without using brute strength, smiled softly at Godfrey's reply. You killed a student. You should be in a juvenile detention center, or at least have gone through a readjustment class. Humanoid summoners like you might snap after their first kill, Gregory said coolly. So he's a humanoid summoner. That explains his violent tendencies. He could beat 8 students so badly, and even had it not been for healers, the red-haired woman said. Isn't your mother the famous Amazon healer? How could she raise a monster like you? If I remember correctly, the people I fought that day were to be treated as such. They needed a monster. Godfrey's response made the woman's eyes widen in rage. What did you say? Sebastian's voice cut in. Your children, especially yours, he said, staring at the red-haired woman, beat up a student in a class below hers in your husband's establishment and locked her in the room until closing hours when the staff found her. The other boy was scarred for life. Not even healers could revert the damage. I don't see their parents here. Andrew Wang, the Asian man and father of Yuan, frowned hard. So you are in support of this beast of a student. I will make sure you get discredited, and a new, more credible individual will take this position. The red-haired woman scowled. Manhattan High will quickly lose its prestige once all our kids leave, and once other families make a complaint, the school's rating will undoubtedly drop. Sebastian brought out a letter and cleared his throat. This is a written part of the unanimous agreement made by the 7 heads of the 7 major cities, declaring that Godfrey Daniels is under their authority and not to be touched unless they say so. Sebastian pushed the letter over to the shocked duo. As if that wasn't enough, he brought out another. This one is from the Pendragon family, who have also stated their protection over Godfrey, signed by Arthur Pendragon himself. Hearing this, Andrew Wang's expression morphed into disbelief, while the red-haired woman stared at Godfrey with a pale face. Even Gregory and Edwin couldn't believe their ears. They could barely comprehend that the strongest family in this part of the world wanted to protect Godfrey, but even more shocking, the absolute leaders of the world had come together, held a meeting, and reached a unanimous agreement all because of Godfrey. These were people who decided what happened in the world. Not even being a tri-summoner was enough to make Godfrey that important. Even a random king tier couldn't be that significant. Gripped with fear, Andrew Wang bowed. I made a mistake. Forgive my words. I'll make sure Yuan doesn't trouble you anymore. Godfrey simply turned to Sebastian. Can I go now? Of course, Sebastian replied with a smile. Godfrey walked out, leaving behind the adults trembling in their own fear. Later in the day, Lucy walked to the door of the Shadow Club but froze, her cheeks reddening as she saw Godfrey on the chair and Isolde on the desk. Godfrey laid his head on her lap while she drew circles in his hair as they communicated in low voices. They looked so calm that Lucy felt they didn't even know what people would think upon spotting them. Just then, Isaac bumped into Lucy while Percival came from the other side. The bump shoved Lucy into the room, attracting Godfrey and Isolde's attention. I didn't mean to interrupt the king and queen, Isaac said with a dramatic bow, prompting the teenagers to blush. Godfrey sat up. You're finally back. How's your arm? Percival asked, still wearing his nose mask as he sat on a desk, placing his feet on the seat. Godfrey flexed the forearm that was sliced off a month ago. It's all right. Now that the king's back, missions should be more fun, Isaac said with a grin. Just then, their attention went to the crowd rushing through the corridor. They followed and found out that everyone wanted to see Damien, the ex-king's fight against Gregory, who was known as the strongest teacher in Manhattan. Even with suppressed bodies, both of them were a force to behold, but the shocking factor was that this famous teacher, who upheld Manhattan even outside the school, was on the losing side against his own student. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel, or want next part of any series, comment down.